Bienvenido a The Talks, el podcast de la Fundación MOP, una serie de conversaciones con figuras imprescindibles de la creación contemporánea. Un espacio para detenernos, escuchar y descubrir nuevas miradas. Gracias por acompañarnos.
I've done a few talks with Bailey over the years, and it's sad he can't be here tonight, but I would say this right to his face. It's much more exciting to be talking to Catherine and Penelope than Bailey. I just want you to know that, Bailey. Bailey spent his life in the presence of elegant and beautiful women. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is what it's like to be photographed and be a muse for David Bailey. Both of you have been photographed extensively by Bailey, but Catherine, you only have one photograph. You're the finale of the exhibition, whereas Penelope, you're one of the spines of the exhibition. I know you've talked about this a lot, but share with us how you first came to be photographed by David Bailey.
Okay, well, I had just graduated high school in America, in New York, and I was in London working at a publisher, my first job working at a publisher's as a reader, and I went to a party and I met the British Vogue editor, B. Miller, and she invited me to come in one of my lunch hours. And so she said, well, maybe we'll do a story on you. I don't know. And she was quite sort of like a headmistress, quite sort of daunting. And I turned up at her office, which was swathed in darkness because I think they were looking at contact sheets or something through a light box, and somebody turned the lights on, and there was this man sitting cross-legged on the floor, and I just looked at him, and it was like I put my finger in a sort of electric socket, and it was the most incredibly electric moment. And he stood up and kind of did a bit of a banter in the old Bailey way. And he said, all right, she'll do. And about 4 or 5 days later, I was in his studio being photographed by him.
Did you know of his reputation before you encountered him?
So, sort of a little bit of a flashback. A few years before, I'd been in the library of my school, boarding school, where I was really miserable. And instead of doing work, I was looking through magazines. And I came across this famous now Time magazine issue, which was called Swinging London. And I opened it up and I started reading all about all these extraordinary people who are coming together in London, and creatively, it was the first time that photographers and actors and aristocrats and, pop stars were all getting together. And I just was completely galvanized by this piece. And I think Bailey was mentioned, and I thought, I've got to be there. I've just got to be there. But I was a 15-year-old, very awkward, introverted, student, or not a very good student. So it seemed unlikely, but I'd made a decision, and somehow it happened. And
your parents let you?
Well, my parents didn't really let me. They just thought I was working in a publisher's office. So the thing is that we had this sort of quite deep attraction, but he was married to Catherine Deneuve, and I was, very mindful of that. And so I went. We had this sitting, which was, it was groundbreaking for me. I felt like I was a frog being dissected in a kind of laboratory. And, but I also felt this kind of very strong heart connection. And anyway, I had to forget about it and went back home where I started university. And about 3 or 4 months later, Bailey appeared. I think he was sort of checking me out again.
There's so much to unpack in that. It's great you reminding us that Swinging London was a Time magazine construct, but also it meant something journalistically at that time. But in the film that's in this room when we're not talking here, we're all, me included, quite dismissive of Swinging London because it's been used over and over again. But it's good to remind ourselves that at that moment, London created waves internationally, and a young, well-educated girl from New York was reading Time magazine and seeing what was going on there. Catherine, it was later, 20 years later, because this was 65, 66, but not quite, but in 81, you and Bailey first met. But just before we talk about that, when did you encounter Bailey? Were you aware of him? Because by that stage he was a celebrity, but for a young girl growing up well, you tell us where you were growing up, but did you know who he was?
And yes, I did know who he was, and I was born in Zambia, and my mother spoke about him and Jean all the time, so it was all part of my upbringing.
And they came to Zambia to shoot?
Yes, yeah. and my parents were very excited, but I was just a child at that period, so I knew about him. And then when I came to London, it was always in my upbringing to become a modeler, because that's what my mother wanted to do. And the first time I met Bailey was at Rogers Street Studios, Holborn Studios, and him and Donovan sitting at the reception checking everybody out. And then Bailey, he's got those sort of piercing eyes, sort of checking me out. I went to the studio with another photographer I was working with, and he came in checking me out. So I was quite flattered, and I was also very attracted to him. It's exactly the same story, really, the same feeling. I mean, he's a scallywag. Yeah,
he had a fatal thing about him.
Mm.
Yeah.
His charm's always talked about, and he's charming even to men. But when he's working with you, when he's behind the camera, when he's making you, well, not making, let's go, does he make you do that? But when he's photographing you as models for fashion shoots, how's his behaviour? Is it seductive?
Well, it can be. He can be incredibly seductive, right? And he can also be very cold and sort of a bit frightening. I mean, he sort of looks at you as if you're an object, and then 3 minutes later, he'll be very engaged and saying something funny to make you laugh. And you're just going through all these different scenarios with him, and it's quite confusing.
Many emotions.
Many emotions.
And he can be incredibly rude, flirtatious, and that you get used to it after a while, but those dark eyes that really do, like you said, dissect you and want to find out everything about you. And it's actually quite unnerving until you get used to it, but it takes a long time. But he always told a story of where he nearly had a fight with himself because someone was staring at him. I'm sure you've heard that story.
No.
It was in a bar or something, and he just, who the hell is this person looking at me? And he was going to have a fight with them, and he realised it was his reflection. So he was even unnerved by it.
I've never heard that. And we ought to say that Bailey, for a lot of his life, hasn't drunk. I mean,
he stopped when I was with him, but I think he was a heavy drinker.
No, but the idea that this is a man who could start a fight with himself in a room seems to have been borne out by that story.
Yes.
He said that he invariably fell in love with the women he photographed. It became just, he fell for it. So from his perspective, you're talking about how seductive he was. I mean, you both had love affairs with him. Catherine's been married to him for the last 30 years. But when you see him photograph other people, is he different? It
all depends on the person and what he wants to get out of them. If he doesn't like them, he'll prod and poke, and he'll get a reaction from them out of dislike. But as he said, they become the centre of his world, and they're his universe for that moment. But then, you'll just dismiss it or forget it, or then bring people back in. But, yeah.
He's very funny as well, and which is very seductive, of course.
Yes.
Isn't it? And also is great for photographs.
Yeah, because
people are animated.
He'll either upset you, make you laugh, sometimes cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. To try and get the best, whatever it is he wants at. And if you're angry, he'll play on that, he'll work on it, if he's really upset you.
Mm.
When you were modelling, so in your first encounters with him, did you feel that he was taking your portrait, or did you feel like it was a working process and it was a commercial thing and he was trying to get the best photographs for whatever commission he'd had?
Never felt commercial. No. I don't know if it did with you, but...
Well, maybe a bit of both, because, Vogue was very insistent on showing the clothes. That was always the thing. So,
but he famously didn't do what they wanted.
Well, that's true, but there was a sort of moment that insistence came into it. So, he had to be mindful of being commercial. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten the jobs at the time.
I always felt that it was very much about you and what you were wearing, but probably from his point of view, he was very mindful that the clothes were perfect. You could, yes, it was a kind of commercial shoot, but I never felt that way when I was being photographed by him. It always felt like a very personal encounter.
I suppose by the time you got to work with him and then fell in love with him and became his wife, he was so celebrated he could do what he wanted to do. But it is, one of the famous stories, isn't it, from 1962 in the first section after the East End in the exhibition of the work he did with Gene Shrimpton in New York, that famously Vogue didn't want it to be shot in the street like that, and Bailey just did it and actually broke the mold, didn't he?
And it was hugely successful. I mean, they used 14 shots in that spread.
He said, I'd like to just interrogate his style, because I have a view about what his style is, and I know that Malek and Fenton, co-curators, do as well. You can determine what makes a Bailey. But he did say, and I don't think he was being disingenuous, that he says that I don't have a style. Well, let's take that with a pinch of salt. But he said, it's the person I'm photographing that determines how I produce the picture, so that my visual language is moulded by, or how is shaped at least by, the person I'm photographing. Is that borne out in your experiences?
Yes, it is on mine.
Yes, I agree. I mean, he's very interactive. He didn't come into the shot with a kind of preconceived idea about what he was going to do. I think it all unfolded in the moment.
He's never like being held to rules, storyboards, anything like that. It's really what's going to happen in the moment, and he'll grab it, because he's always said to me he liked the mistake, the drip, what was going on at the time, and he'd use it. And I think whoever he was with, that influenced the way he took pictures and the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
When you see contact sheets, which is another great thing in the exhibition, you get a chance to see actually how good many of the photographs are, but Bailey picking the one. Of course, when you're making photographs, you don't see the image. I mean, I think there's a younger generation of here who've never experienced the idea of taking a photograph and actually seeing immediately what it is you've taken, because that's what a digital image does on your phone. But so Bailey wouldn't know visually that he'd got the right one. And I once asked him, well, how did you know when you got the right one? And he just said, I just knew.
He's got an incredible visual memory, and he knows exactly how many rolls he's done. He knows exactly what's on the contact sheet before he even sees it. And he was always excited to get the contact sheets back, but then always disappointed and wanted a bit more. But he knew exactly which was the shot before he had even seen the contact sheet. Yeah.
And he's incredibly instinctive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his real thing. He always said school is absolutely pointless. He left school when he was 13, and had a series of jobs and went into the Air Force. But everything is instinctive with him. He looks at somebody and he sort of immediately feels out who they are. And
even now, everything is visual.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
and he's sharp visually. Maybe not verbally, but, well, yeah, he can be sharp-edged verbally, but...
Yeah.
So the two of you have worked extensively as models, but as subjects of photography. Did you develop a sense of either a look in Bailey's eye or knowing how you felt within your own bodies that he got the right shot? Did it surprise you when he went, yeah, I've got it? Or did you start to know, yeah, I reckon he must have got it now. This is it. Did you develop that?
I must say I didn't really know. I mean, he knew, absolutely. It's quite hard when you're on the other side of the camera, don't you think, to know
It
what's
is really
right.
hard, and also you're following what he wants. I mean, I made a couple of mistakes on shoots where I'd question what he was doing, and I got my head ripped off.
Forget it.
Yeah. I learned not to say, well, why are you taking me from that angle? And it's like, well, I know what I'm doing, just shut up.
Yeah.
So that first shoot he did of you, which is in the exhibition, kneeling with pigtails, what do you remember about that now? Or do you remember very little? It's just an image that you can recognize?
Oh, no, I remember everything about it. I remember exactly how I felt, which was a mixture of sort of attraction, terror, also sort of embarrassment, I guess, a little bit, and there were so many emotions going on at the same time, and that sort of summed up my life with Bailey as well. It wasn't just that shoot, it was so many experiences I had with him.
And do you see that in your eyes in that photograph? Because I see something, when I see an extraordinary image, an arresting image, a formally inventive image, but it's also a fashion photograph. I don't see terror or fear or desire in your eyes. I just see, well, someone I didn't know and I'm now getting to know.
Openness, maybe. I mean, I think you're very open at the age of 17 or 18. So it was possibly that. But inside, it was another story.
And do you see an evolution of confidence in your own self-image in, say, the Disney photograph, which we call it the Disney photograph, but the Mickey Mouse ears, which is the wig, which you could tell us about? Do you see yourself changing as a model there?
For that particular shot, or just in general?
Both, for that shot and in general.
The thing is that I felt as a model that the first year or so with Bailey was really sort of ecstatically happy. Everything was great. We were very much in love. And then the problem is that there were many, many girls who came into the studio every day with their amazing portfolios, and they all flung themselves at Bailey. He was sort of like a pop star. And, he's so attractive, and he was this famous photographer, so they all wanted to work with him. And I found that incredibly difficult, because he was my first boyfriend ever, and I felt very territorial and very jealous, and sort of I lost my confidence along the way. And he wasn't particularly great at bolstering my confidence either,
He's very seductive when you first start working with him for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But also, by the time I was with him, I knew what his reputation was like. And whoever he's photographing, he'd like to seduce them.
Yeah.
I mean, in the image and maybe some other ways too. But No, I just see in the pictures that we've done the sort of evolution of the relationship and how I feel, but I don't suffer from being jealous or anything like that. It's too destructive.
It is destructive, but I'm in awe of anybody who can not feel jealous.
But he likes to play on that a bit and use
Indeed.
it. Yeah. So it's best not to go there.
Yeah. Well, you're a lot smarter than me, is all I can say.
Yeah, it gives you a bit more power that you appear not to care.
Yeah.
And that kind of keeps him more sort of like trying to work you out.
Yeah.
And is that...
He'll spot vulnerability. It's almost like a shark smelling blood in the water.
Oh, God.
At the risk of sounding like a very bad shrink for the two of you, which you clearly don't need from me, but when you talk about power and he uses it, are we talking about in relationships with you, or are we talking, maybe both, or are we talking about power to get the image he wants?
Possibly both.
I think both, yeah.
Because he's very possessive.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not the right thing to say that you like his property. That's awful. But once he's with someone, he expects to do everything with you, and he wants you there with him all the time. And then if it's sort of not convenient, he can get a bit irritated by it. But that's right. If you step away, then that sort of unnerves him a bit.
I suppose the interesting thing is that he met both of you when you were very young, but you had been photographed by quite a few celebrated photographers before Penelope, Diane Arbus, Richard Avedon, Cecil Beaton, I think. Whereas, Catherine, you'd only been photographed by...
Barry Latigan first.
Yeah.
I just did the Italian Vogue collections with him. And obviously, Bailey was in London, I was based in London, and then started working with him very quickly after that. And then once I started working with him, I didn't work with anybody else.
So let's talk about other photographers and how different. We can see visually the difference, but how is it to work for other photographers? I mean, Diane Arbus, you were 13, Richard Avedon, you were 16, 17. But tell us about those experiences.
Well, I had never been photographed by a professional photographer before, and Diane Arbus was not well known. She was working for this sort of society magazine called Town and Country, which is quite odd to think about now. And she came, and it was sort of, I'd just been riding. She wanted to take a photograph of me in a field with my riding gear on and a sort of hat, velvet cap, and it was about 40 degrees, as I remember, August, and I was lying in this straw field, and it went on for 3.5 hours, and I thought I would go mad and never wanted to be photographed ever again. But my father somehow had the veto on these photographs, and he said, no way in the world, she looks like a freak, funnily enough. And, Diane Arbus's reputation as photographing sort of freaks had not been established then, so it's kind of odd. And then they compromised, and she came back and did a photograph of me, which also took 3.5 hours. But the result is really good in terms of she captured an expression or something that was of kind of teenage longing and kind of being a bit pissed off as well, the adolescence, that was quite amazing. Then I worked for a lot with Avedon.
Just before we go to...
Yeah.
What did Diane Arbus do? How was her manner when she was photographing you? Because interesting, the dynamic between a woman and a girl, but difference with Bailey, what was her manner in photographing you?
Well, she just went on and on and on and on, and sort of, I can't remember that I moved around that much. I was stuck in this one position in the heat, and, I didn't care about being photographed for Town and Country. I just wanted to get out of these clothes or whatever. And she was relentless. She was actually a bit of a torturer, I think, which is kind of interesting when you look at a lot of her pictures now.
Absolutely.
So
then Avedon.
And then Avedon was just a complete joy to work for. He was made you feel? I started working for him when I was just about turning 17, and I'd never really done any fashion shots before, and he made you feel that you were part of this team, this integral part of the team, that he'd never seen anybody who was quite as creative. He had this incredible energy. He was 48 at the time, I was 17, but he sort of felt like he had this energy of a teenager. He was directing everything. The lighting, he was directing me, but in the way that was so encouraging that it made me feel that I was doing it. And so it was great fun working with him. Wonderful team. Everybody loved him. Then at lunchtime, there was a huge table in the kitchen, sort of, I don't know, for 20 people, all the assistants and lighting people and everybody came and sat down. We all sat down and had lunch together. And then people would come in, like Mike Nichols and Lartigue came once, and various photographers, Dovima, and there they all were, and you were sitting next to them and having lunch with them, and it was, always kind of inspiring and incredible.
Bailey always said that Avedon did the best pictures of you, and you just when I said that, you said that's true.
Yeah. Well, I think in a way I wasn't, not having that emotional connection, even though it wasn't emotional in terms of I really liked him, but not having that emotional connection made it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bailey's always affirmed a respect and admiration for Avedon, hasn't he? I mean, all artists. Well, let's qualify this. Many artists don't slag off other artists in public. But in private, you sometimes get a sense of who they really like and who they don't really like. But Avedon's remained one of Bailey's heroes.
Oh, he still slagged him off.
Exactly. I'm glad you said it.
I'm glad you said that. He didn't to me.
He usually slags everybody off.
Yeah, especially other photographers.
Slagged off with love. But what about Cecil Beaton?
Oh, well, that was another very competitive relationship between both of them. I mean, Bailey famously did a documentary on Cecil.
Which you were in.
Which I was in, but it was around the same time that we were together. And Cecil was very kind of, but he did it anyway. And it didn't get very good reviews at the time, but now, looking back on it, it's such a good film where it has a lot of great things in it, great footage in it. And Cecil was, they just were kind of from two opposite ends of the spectrum. And even though Cecil pretended to kind of be amused by Bailey, he was actually infuriated by Bailey. By
his success, his talent?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. And also his sort of rudeness. Because Beaton came from another world where everybody kind of pretended to be tremendously polite, but, there was a lot of backbiting as well.
Well, there's that famous Brian Duffy remark, isn't there, that he said that before him, Donovan and Bailey, he said fashion photographers in England were tall, aristocratic and homosexual, and they were short, fat, and heterosexual. Not quite true, but the class thing was also there, wasn't it? That presumably would have rubbed up.
Yeah.
Did he talk to you about Beaton? Because he was quite comically dismissive, but kind of respected him.
He did, but he just said he was a bitchy queen. But he doesn't mince his words, and he said he could be quite, like you said,
yeah.
But he liked him, and he did admire him, and he did some great portraits of him.
He told me that when he had a show at the National Portrait Gallery in the very early 70s, He said to me he was the first living photographer to have a show at the National Portrait Gallery, British photographer. And I said, Cecil Beaton did 2 years before. And he said, as quick as a flash, he was dead by then. He didn't quite mean that. But he then later was really proud because Beaton did have another show, but it was small. And then Bailey, the Stardust show in 2012, he said he said to me again, I'm quite proud, well, he didn't say proud, but he just said Cecil Beaton didn't have 2 big shows at the National Portrait Gallery. So there was a kind of competitiveness that's still there with him.
Bailey's incredibly competitive with everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, even the dog.
Really?
Yes. It's like if it's about somebody else, he brings it back round to himself. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do.
But both of you have been photographed extensively by Bailey from an early age, I mean, from your teens. And we're all wandering around in awe and reverence, and it's kind of eye-popping to see this exhibition, familiar work and new work. But you're seeing a lot of images of yourselves when you look at Bailey's work, which must be kind of familiar. But I was just thinking, actually, how much he must have determined your self-image, how you have seen yourselves over the years. Let's unpack that a bit, because that must have been the case for you at the beginning. Is it still a strong feature in your self-image of what Bailey produced of you in those formative teenage years?
I think it did at the time, but the problem is that we were together about 5 years or something, and as things progressed, it didn't go too well because of my jealousy and because of his kind of flagrant, womanizing, I guess. And that was all very painful. And I sort of lost my confidence completely and felt that I was just a sort of sham of a model and didn't really... there were all these girls who were naturally beautiful, and I felt that I was just, did it all by makeup, and it was all a kind of fluke, which I think is, partly true. And but the thing is, so I came down with this, or if you can call it that, I came out with this sort of terrible acne at the age of 21, which I think was a kind of expression of anger and frustration and unhappiness, like being unhappy in my own skin. And it was very hard not to think, I was just, I'd made it to the top and then I just sort of plummeted down. And that did affect my confidence for years afterwards. But recently I published a book, which is sort of about that whole period. I felt like it was something I had to write and sort of explore the whole experience that I'd had with Bailey and at the time. And it was very healing experience. And I sort of got over feeling either confident or not confident. I just felt like I'd found myself through writing it.
It's called A Piece of My Heart, and I'm halfway through it. I'm enjoying it very much. But it's very inventive because it uses your experience as a trigger. It's not a memoir. Use it as a trigger. It'd be nice to talk a bit more about that. But what I was also wanting to get at was all of us have memories of our pasts, and I suppose photographs are also staging posts in those memories, and they sometimes help us reframe or reconstruct the memories that we have, because you look at a photograph and you'd forgotten certain things, and then the photograph puts it back into the memory. But it's just the images that Bailey took of you. Are they still central, do you think, in your self-image of that period? Notwithstanding the lack of confidence, which is, you've been very candid and touching about, but the physical fact of the images he took, does that still part of the construction of who you are now?
Well, I suppose everything that you ever do is part of what you are now, but I don't really identify with my appearance as much anymore. And also photographs lie, don't they?
Yes.
So much. I mean, you can be going through so many different things, and this photograph comes out and it looks like, I don't know, some incredible image, beautiful image, and you look at it and you think what you were going through that day, which wasn't always
Pleasant.
Or,
yeah. And then sometimes you have pictures taken when you're doing something else, especially, when you've got children and trying to do the garden or whatever, just normal stuff, and you get sort of bothered with someone with a camera interfering and sort of then start directing you into doing. I mean, I'm glad now, obviously, but at the time it's a huge irritation when you're trying to sort of sort the kids out and got a lorry load of dirt that you're doing your garden with, and then you see some great image in it, and it's just, just leave me alone. But you don't dare say it. You just get on and go, all right, and then you don't get anything done.
But I love those pictures of you, of candid pictures of you and the children.
Yeah, I mean, they are magical.
Yeah,
they're probably my favourite, and it's fantastic for Paloma, Fenton and Sasha to have that reference of basically their whole childhood. And they are incredible pictures.
Yeah.
Your relationships with him and your marriage to him is a collaboration. Did you not feel the more you were photographed by him, you started to collaborate with him in the construction of images?
No.
No.
It's all about what he wants. I mean, he would ask, and I suppose it is a form of collaboration because you're doing something and he sees it visually that it's interesting. So it's just something about you, and then he'll capture it. And you don't see it as being anything particularly special because it's what you do. But he's watching it and seeing, I mean, we've done nudes in the garden when I've been doing the gardening, usually being bitten on my backside by red ants or something, which is infuriating. And he tells you to shut up and just get on with it, and stop making a fuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that extraordinary image in the exhibition that comes out of the dark section with nudes, and it's before the photograph of Marie Helvin in the kind of green, red, yellow outfit lying on the jetty by the ocean. And it's in black and white, and it's in the house in Primrose Hill, down in wherever it is, it's black. It's with a rock band, Procol Harum. That didn't feel like a collaboration at the time, because it reads like it now, reads like a fantastically staged, constructed image.
Yeah, well, that was the first sitting that I did with Bailey.
Same day?
Same day. And I was like, I think the mini cab had been called because I was on my way home. And he came down the stairs and he said, you really have to help me because I've got these weedy pop stars upstairs. And they're like, oh, so boring. We've got to do something to help this picture along. So I went upstairs and just in what I was wearing, my own clothes, and staged this photograph. And that's it, sort of lying on the floor or sitting on the floor, and they're all around.
And he told you a lot of what to do, or just said, sit there? How much was he moving stuff around? How much was it being?
He was moving stuff around, but I don't know. There was an atmosphere in the room. It's always about atmosphere, photographs. And if you can create an atmosphere, then that does show, I think, in a photograph, don't you?
Yes.
And there's plenty of atmosphere in his house,
Notwithstanding Catherine's agonies of red ants, biting a bottom, this idea about filming outside and filming in the studio, and it's so strong, isn't it, in the 60s and 70s, where Bailey taking the studio into the street and opening it up, and then the street into the studio and giving it energy. By the time you both met him, that had been established, well established in your case. Were you conscious of that boundary blurring when you first started working with him in the 60s?
Yes, I think there were no boundaries. That was one of the problems, probably. I mean, I didn't know about boundaries. He didn't have any boundaries. It was he was just such a passionate person about life in general, and he just very in the moment, and he did what he wanted, which was quite rare in those days, because especially in those days, because people were much more sort of relegated to their own personas. So there were still people in England, men on the street wearing bowler hats. I mean, it was a lot more, I'd say the bulk of the population were still very in rigid kind of characteristics, which I think the 60s kind of blew apart, but it took a while for, everybody to catch up.
There was much more freedom in those days. You could go anywhere. For instance, Stonehenge is all closed off now, but then, and even in the 80s, you could climb all over it.
Yeah.
So you'd do photographs all over the world, in Britain,
Afghanistan.
on monuments that you can't go anywhere near now.
So same here though in Spain, in Santiago, in the cathedral, you used to be able to bash your head against a sculpture. Now you can't do it. But there's a parallel there. You mentioned Stonehenge, and there's a monument near Stonehenge called Avebury, which is more open. And there's the Rolling Stones album cover and the photograph there of them strolling through this ancient site. The section in the exhibition about musicians, he's a great photographer of musicians, but he grew up with musicians. And of course, you just came in. I mean, Jagger was already established by then, but how was he around musicians by the time you met him?
Just the way he always is with everybody. He's funny, he's in the moment, and he also knows what he's doing. He's sort of had that idea of putting the scarves over their heads. I don't know where did that come from?
He said it came from the African Queen,
Right.
Catherine Hepburn, and that's what he based on. And Bianca really liked that picture, but Mick hated it.
He thought he might look too feminine, didn't
Yes.
he?
Yeah.
This is the goat's head soup image, which is in the music room, the big blown-up image, but the album covers on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we know, and it's established in the early room, that he wanted to be a musician. There's a picture of him playing his trumpet. But, Fenton told the story beautifully the other day about, his in the RAF when he was doing national service, his commanding officer literally stole his trumpet, so he went and bought a camera, and in a sense he replaced one with the other. But so you said he was treated musicians like anyone else, so there wasn't a particular energy with him when he was with musicians, because he had a kind of respect, and deep down he'd wanted to be one of them?
He treated everybody exactly the same.
Yeah, very much. And I think that sort of, people like Cecil Beaton and B. Miller, the editor of Vogue, I mean, that sort of, he didn't kind of stand to authority at all. He
was not
was
impressed by anybody.
No.
Even when he photographed the Queen, he kept on calling her girl. Sit here, girl. I mean, Fenton was on that shoot, so obviously I'm just repeating stories I've been told. But, yeah, and then he asked her if her jewellery was real.
He said the crown jewels, right?
No, she had those
emeralds.
Emeralds, yeah. And he fiddled with them. Is it all right if I touch it? And then he said, "Sorry, ma'am, I've got truth Tourette's."
But I think. We've said before. I think that you can see in her eyes. I may be projecting, but there's definitely a rapport, and she probably has been. Well, she's definitely been photographed by many people and many great photographers. But I should imagine many people are in awe, and you keep telling us that Bailey actually is in awe of no one. Yeah. And I would imagine she would somehow respond to that authenticity. He's probably one of the few people who behaves pretty well in the same way if he's with the Queen as if he is with you, Mick Jagger, or the guy who's cleaning his car.
She just said to one of the people that looks after her that, "Oh, he's a cheeky chappy." So I think she was amused by him. Yeah.
I have a theory which I'm not even going to put to you, because you'll say, no, he photographs everyone the same way. I think he's a great photographer of musicians. I think he's a brilliant portrayer of artists. I think that artist series, which is ad hoc, and I know he's just photographed Ai Weiwei, and there's many artists going back. There's a brilliant one of Anthony Gormley where you can see the sculpture just through the lens. And that fantastic image in the second room of Man Ray with just the nose and the eye, Man Ray, the photographer and artist, the artist's eye. I think he has a real sympathy with artists because actually he is an artist. He makes art, he makes collages, but and he's always had this thing about, certainly in the UK, in Britain, photography and art only until recently were separated. You know, the photographic collections have to be in the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is where Bailey is, and in the National Portrait Gallery, because it's a pantheon of national biography. But the Tate, until the 1990s, wouldn't have artists using photography. That went to the V&A. So that division, I know, annoyed him. Sorry, I'm going to get to the point in a minute. So there's all of that. But he was someone who responded interestingly to artists. So let's start with Dali, because you were there, weren't you? He met Dali in the early 60s, but you were there when he photographed Dali, and that's in the exhibition.
Yes. Well, it was quite difficult to talk about Dali because I think he pretended not to speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish. So
amazing how he worked in Hollywood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dali without speaking English. Anyway, yeah.
He always referred to himself as Dali, Dali like, girl or something. And he was tremendously sort of imposing and sort of looked at one in this sort of, I don't know what you call it. He was theatrical, I suppose, just very theatrical, and as if he was playing a part. And he was a bit of a voyeur, I think, because I remember him being a bit pervy in a lift once.
Do share.
But
Do share.
Okay. Nothing much to say, but I just have to say that years later, so I was a bit sort of Dali, but then years later I went to this retrospective of his at the Hayward, of his early work, and oh my God, I was blown away. I mean, I suppose I was very ignorant at the time, so, but having a little bit of education about his early work was amazing, just amazing. It's stuck with me ever since, yeah.
And that early work is amazing of Dali's. But It's interesting that Bailey, by the time you encountered him, he said he was not so interested in the work by that stage, but he was very interested in Dali, the man who he thought was the artwork, or was more interesting than the artwork.
I suppose so. I mean, there's that famous story that he told you about the canes.
Oh, the cane, yes. Yeah. He said, "Do you want to meet my mother, my sister?" And then it spun. I mean, that's just a story on the cane. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite odd, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I did see Bailey a little bit sort of intimidated once or twice by directors. So I think with Stanley Kubrick and with Visconti, he was in awe, definitely. And he did this documentary on Visconti that wasn't really finished. He wasn't very well, I think, Visconti. But he sort of idolized him. And same with Kubrick.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Or he'd just be very rude to directors to get something out of them. Yeah. I mean, when the experience I had, by the time he wasn't in awe of anybody.
Right.
And half the time he didn't know who they are, didn't bother finding out who they are, or pretended he didn't know who they were. Probably that's more the case.
I suppose the fact he was making films, and he started to make films in the 60s and in the 70s, 80s. I mean, I think he's a great television commercial director, but I think his films are, I mean, it's interesting, you saying the Beaten one, it looks much more interesting now than when some people saw it to begin with. I think he's a very good filmmaker, but obviously he's not a great filmmaker, not in the tradition of that. So it's interesting that in that era, he was at least in awe or respectful of the achievements of those people. He has an interesting relationship with Damien Hirst, doesn't he? Because, I mean, Damien's irreverent, but the two of them, I mean, he's photographed Damien a lot, but they've also made collaborations together, haven't they? They've made collages and they've made work together.
He did a book on Damien called 8.5. So he just photographed Damien pulling 1,000 faces. It's like a flip book. I mean, you've seen it, haven't you?
Yeah. But I also saw the work which was shown at the Gagosian Gallery in London, where they made collages together.
Well, they did the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. With Damien made the most incredible frames. And he had Damien various guises of Jesus Christ or one of the disciples. And that was forget which gallery it was.
Gagosian.
Was it at Gagosian? At the Stations of the Cross?
Yeah.
I thought it was at, not MoMA, I can't think of the name now. It was around Sadie Cole's gallery where it used to be. It was around the back there.
Right.
But maybe it was Gagosian who used it, yeah. And yeah, they've always swapped. Bailey would do any portraits or pictures that he wanted. And Damien is always incredibly generous anyway. So they collaborate that way, just exchange artwork.
We'll end with his, I mean, it's some way off yet, we hope, but we'll end with his legacy when we've had questions from the floor. But just briefly, before I do throw you to the floor, do you think he feels now, and did he feel then, does he feel recognised enough? I mean, most artists, creative people, want more recognition, but they won't necessarily go on record. But do you think deep down he knows he's a revered photographer?
No. I think it irritates him because he feels he's much more of an artist than a photographer. He's always said that. I'm an artist, I'm not a photographer. I'm an artist that uses a camera. And it is just a tool like the paintbrush.
I don't really know how he feels, but what I do think is that knowing him, you know, way back when, and then seeing him go through different periods of time where he wasn't always kind of in the spotlight. You know, other photographers had come up and were working, made him furious. But, you know, he wasn't being used as much, or, you know, dark periods, which everybody has. And, but he never stopped taking photographs the entire time. I mean, if he wasn't working in fashion, then he'd go out and take photographs of the East End, or he'd go to Assam, or he'd go to, I don't know, wherever it was. He never stopped. And I think that is the definition of an artist. He was completely passionate.
And then we travelled all through Australia for a couple of months, and he photographed everything in the outback. But then it never got published. I mean, there's a book in progress called Bailey's Matilda of a lot of Polaroids and things of Aboriginals. But he had a problem with Ilford Film, where the numbers went all through the images. And he complained to Ilford, and they didn't refund him the trip or anything. They just said, we replaced the rolls of film. So it just got stuck on the back burner. I mean, now he quite likes the mistake in the images, but at the time, I think he was really upset about it.
Right.
But he's always finding a project to do. So if he hasn't got commissions, he's always doing something for himself. If it's not painting or filmmaking, I mean, he never ever stops, and he's always got a camera.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned Australia, and that was the first trip you did with him.
Yes.
And you did a trip with him to Australia.
No.
No, not to. Sorry, to Kathmandu. Sorry, you travelled extensively. So,
yes.
but what was interesting was that I think he's a great travel photographer. There's all those books he's published, and you know, the New
Guinea.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Starting in the early 70s.
Amazing.
But reading those accounts of Victorian explorers, Richard Burton and others, young husband when he was younger. But fashion gave him the opportunity to travel. But when he was travelling with you, he wasn't just taking fashion shoots, was he?
Not at all. He was always doing reportage. And remember, he's done like 100 photographic books.
Yeah.
100 or something like that. Yeah.
Close to, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's 1,000, according to Bailey.
And he's just doesn't stop. And I think that's really what makes him so different to a lot of other photographers, because it's just what he does. That's who he is, really.
Curious and the least complacent of photographers.
In the 80s, he got a bit bored with all the fighting with people with fashion, so he moved into making commercials and then came back to taking photographs. Although he didn't stop, he still did it, and he painted a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But he did get fed up with it. Yeah.
Right. Hold legacy.